Welcome to Curtain Call, the show where we go behind the curtain with the stars of the culture wars. I'm your host, Alexandra Marshall, and this week we are joined by Marcus Fu. So, Marcus Fu, welcome to Curtain Call.
Hello.
So, I went to your Twitter bio, which is where everybody lives these days and where you do most of your political speaking and talking. And I took the bio, and in the bio, it describes you as a young, gay, conservative writer, member of both the Liberal Party and Young Liberals. You're interested in the royal family, ancient history, and of course, your beloved temples. But I also know that you happen to be trapped in the prison state of Western Australia and that you are a brand new Australian. Now, considering these identity boxes which you check, so one would have thought that you would have joined the Labor Party or the Greens. Boo, were you tempted?
Well, I do remember one time, it was a couple of years ago, I was Pauline Hanson, or something about Pauline Hanson appeared on television. And I think I instantly said that, I instantly mouthed off that she was a racist because obviously I listened to her speeches before. Something happened along the lines in the second final year of high school. I decided, okay, I'll join Twitter. Oh, it happened during the Brexit referendum, and for some reason, I ended up supporting Brexit. I don't know why. I was clueless. I didn't even know what the European Union was. But before that, I used to research about Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, Cyril Ramsay. So I used to really like Margaret Thatcher. I used to watch her speeches. I think that grew on me. And obviously, I became a conservative, and then I started campaigning for the current Liberal Party in 2019. And I think during that campaigning, that just continued to grow on me in terms of...
You are a relatively recent convert to the world of politics. Would that be fair to say? Over the last 5 or so years, you've gotten involved in politics?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, especially as a young guy, definitely. And I remember when I was in high school, I supported Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton because, and then my friends started asking me, and I started to feel, oh God, like, oh crap. And then I was not aware of, the culture wars and all that. And the more and more I got into politics, obviously, the more and more I began to realize what the left really were, the culture wars, and what politics really are. And it became more and more interesting. Down, so I began to write articles about it. And so...
Well, you write a lot of articles about liberty in particular, I noticed. That's one of the themes of your articles. But you have picked by far the worst state in Australia to write about liberty, which is WA. So, why do people keep voting for Labor in Western Australia? Do you have any theories about that?
Well, I think there's a couple of theories. One of them, had it not been a pandemic, McGowan would be in trouble because he hasn't done much to WA. Right? The merchandise budget has gone up to $2 billion. Not a single check has been laid. And before that, there was a dining range by-election, and Labour suffered, I think it was a 9% swing against them, so they lost a seat of dining range. So the Liberals won that seat, but at the same time, the WA Liberal Party, the parliamentary team, they they were just not congealed to take on the McGowan Labour Party because McGowan during the pandemic was very good in coming off as a charismatic, competent leader, and of course, he used the coronavirus fear to basically scale us all. And when Zach Gilgert became the leader, instead of talking about the businesses and families affected by the lockdown, the border shutdown, the tourism industry, he decided that it would be best to side with the government on all the health advices. So there was no ammunition given to the Liberal Party. And then came the Greens, the new energy plan, which was to upgrade the Labour Party. And this scared a lot of Liberal voters, and in particular, Collie, where there's a coal-fired power station. In that plan, they were going to get rid of that coal-fired power station by 2025. Candidates and volunteers began to turn on Gilgert, and then when he said he conceded weeks before the election, it was like the Liberal Party just gave up. But I think it was mainly because they not been very strong as a parliamentary team. And one of the upper house members, John Stimber, actually shut off on Twitter, said that this was years in the making, that there were just not good enough pre-selections going on. They were just not doing the hard work on policy, which is so important in opposition. So years in the making, none of them realized that, we're in deep trouble. And obviously, McGowan won a re-election because, of course.
You said he's charismatic. Like you said, McGowan is a charismatic leader, and he's well known across in New South Wales for being the man who wanted to put ankle bracelets on COVID patients, which we thought was a bit of a step too far. But what was it like being one of the young Liberals on the ground during that last election where you had to front up when you knew that you had a leader like Kirkup? You had to actually be there and go through the motions of an election when your leader's like, we're going to lose. What was that like?
Well, I didn't campaign because I was busy with TAFE from work. But, when I saw Liberal campaigners at the polling booths, when I saw them frustrated over how he was handling the whole campaign, I just felt so sorry for them because I've been through campaigning. It is tough. It is really tough. It is exhausting. It is so time consuming. And, these people give up their time willingly. And then it was just a badly run campaign. It was lackluster. Even Scott Morrison did everything in his power to not come to WA. It's just like trying to avoid WA as much as possible.
You couldn't save Kirkup, let's be honest about that. I mean, he was a disaster before he even started a campaign. But one last question about WA, just because us from the East Coast are curious. Is there any hope on the horizon for the Liberals in WA? Like, is there any talent coming up, or are you currently basically without a political party that has any intention of winning?
Well, I don't think winning government should be our aim next election. It should be about gaining seats and rebuilding the party. In fact, one of the top WA Liberal MPs in the federal parliament, Senator Dean Smith, has proposed a plan for grassroots members to vote for the leader, not for the party, which is what people like John Ruddock has been advocating. But they're now putting in place a mechanism where you can join a policy subcommittee and obviously draw a policy there. So I signed up for the education subcommittee, but also mechanism for members and branches to also submit policy. And they also want to make sure that no leader can implement or put forward a policy without wider party input. The reason why the new energy plan failed was because there was no party input. It was like a captain call from Gilgert, and that just blindsided the state party, his federal colleagues. It blindsided all campaigners and volunteers. So obviously we need to do a lot of rebuilding, but Labour Party has been British before. When Campbell Newman won government, Labour was reduced to 9 seats. Obviously, what we need to do is to rebuild the party. Winning government is not the aim, because we've got 2 members in the lower house, we've got 7 members in the upper house. But the Liberals have joined on an agreement with the National Party to hold the McGowan government account. Problem is, the leader is the same shadow energy minister who was responsible for the new energy plan. So that's not.
You're basically governed by the person whose stupid idea it was lost you in the first place. Brilliant. That's not going to be winning strategy.
It's like still putting people like Chris Bowen on the shadow cabinet, even though he's, in the Labour Party.
Let's talk about your writing, because this is what you started doing. You become a political writer, and you run 2 different blogs. The first is Buoy's Culture blog, which is where you talk about your love of temples and traveling and all sorts of stuff like that. And the second one, which is your political blog, is called Buoy's Conservative blog. Now, you wrote an article recently which caused a bit of a stir, and that was called The Repellent Arrogance of Leftist Identity Politics and Why the Sewell Report is Deeply Important. Now, this report is also known as the Report of the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. It was released in the UK, and it was meant to be the long-awaited proof that activists have been praying for regarding ethnic disparities within the UK, that they use as the justification for all their race politics. But the left are furious with the report. Why is that?
Because it finally brought down the myth that Britain was institutional racist, that ethnic minorities were being held against by structural institutional racist blocs. And it revealed that in areas of education and health, and even in pay gap disparities, ethnic minorities are outperforming white people. And data from Scotland revealed that ethnic minorities are actually living longer than white people. And actually, since 2012, or in 2012, the ethnic minority pay gap has shrunk to 2.3%, which is very good. And in education, Asians are beating white British students in areas such as English and math. So it was written by a British-born Jamaican man, and the entire commission was made out of non-white ethnic minority experts across different fields. And it was written in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests, and it revealed that Britain still has some work to do, but it's not an institution racist country. And people like Labour MP Clive Lewis compared the commissioners to the Ku Klux Klan. One of the toxic voices in race relations debate, Dr. Shala Mashopamimu, called Dr. Sewell a token black man. Professor Gopal of Cambridge University, who's another toxic voice, she compared him to Joseph Goebbels because they both have a PhD. And so they were just furious. And it got to the point where the Equalities Minister, Kevin Bagnall, had to fund up from Parliament to call for a nuanced debate. And Labour MP Don Butler condemned Bagnall. When the minister condemned the commissioners being called house Negro, house slave, talking black man as gaslighting of a national scandal. And then she called it a shabby Valentine, written by Musa Okwanga, who called Priti Patel a racial gatekeeper, Sajid Javid a racial gatekeeper, because they are from the Conservative Party of Britain, and because they hold influential offices. And she used that to justify calling the commissioners racial gatekeepers. And Don Butler is a black Labour MP as well. So it was just a torrent of racial abuse.
It's a bit strange how the people who claim to be anti-racist and are complaining about ethnic disparities are the ones throwing around racial abuse on the floor of Parliament in order to justify their anger. I mean, that seems to be a bit strange. But The report is a big report. It's about 250 pages. And what it basically did was prove that the anti-European narrative of the left is a fabrication. Like the UK is not an institutionally racist country. Under the heading, What Lies Behind Disparity, the report actually says, the idea that all ethnic minority people suffer a common fate and a shared disadvantage is an anachronism. But that being said, and even though the report pretty much destroys the narrative, people still kill each other over a lie, and Black Lives Matter and their rights have proved that. So when we're talking about the release of the report, has this actually changed race politics in the UK, or do you think it'll just, the whole Black Lives Matter conversation and the institutionalized gender quotas, things like that, are they just going to continue unabated in the wake of this report?
Well, I'm not sure. It all depends what the Equalities Minister or what Boris Johnson government is going to do. The Commission has released 24 recommendations, including getting rid of the homogenizing term BAME. But it depends on what they're going to do with it. I mean, like, the left has had a long march through the institutions. It's going to take more than one report to bring them down. Like, they've been in schools, academia, politics, journalism. It's going to be one hell, but it's going to take a generation, I believe, to rid of the left in these institutions, because the problem with conservatives is that we saw the culture war as being beneath the economy and jobs. And so for years and decades, we just didn't really bother until we finally realized and went, oh crap, they're in every institution. They're not just on Twitter or on the internet or just on university campuses. They're in every facet of society. So it's going to take more than one report. But yeah, so
yeah,
I
well,
know
the left has really woven itself through the entire structure of our politics and our social lives. But you did touch on the fact that one of the things the report calls for is to end the phrase BAME. It also, in addition, wants to get rid of the language of white privilege and white fragility. These are the sort of trending hashtags the left uses to attack people based upon their race. It's quite a racist activity they engage in. But in your article, and I'm going to quote from your article, you say, for them, meaning the activists, their precious identity grievance complex was hit by a report that is bringing down the myth that Britain is institutionally racist and that they don't know how to react. So the report, basically what you're saying is it should have led to politicians dropping these mad activist ideas and taxpayer-funded processes, but of course it didn't. Do you know why it is being ignored? Like, is it just because it's one report, or do you think that politicians will ignore all the reports that are done, and it doesn't matter how many reports are produced in this region?
Well, I think that is mainly because the politicians, especially in the Labour Party, British Labour Party, they don't want to get rid of all this because then they might be condemned by the activists. But I think it's more to do with that all this white fragility, white privilege, all these social justice courses, I think they help to actually fund those who are pushing it, who are running it. And so the politicians have tied themselves to it, and they don't want to admit that this is wrong, because it will, if they denounce it and they drop it, they will have nothing to latch on, excuse to use their moral authority. That's the thing, moral authority against society, against a supposedly institutionally, systemically structured racist society. So if you don't have this, what are they going to use? That's the thing. So they probably know it's wrong.
They're a
But
bit like
like,
the old communists who demand a class war, but if there's no class disparity, they can't use the class war to gain power. So in the UK, if there's no ethnic disparity, these new Marxists, they've got nothing to justify the way they're subverting the systems for power. Is that sort of? I mean, that's what your article basically
yeah,
says.
because this whole critical race theory is all this neo-cultural Marxist, this neo-racism is taking the oppressed, which is black people, and the oppressor, which is white people, and they used to be the working class and the wealthy elite. So they they have this and they have built this up. Critical race theory started in the 70s and it's just built up, and and they believe it to be true because if you drop all this, how are you going to get work companies to teach their employees to try to be less white? How do you get people to read Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility book? How do you, um, you know, indoctrinate students to be foot soldiers of cultural Marxism? So without any of this, they're going to be hopeless, they're going to be defeated. So they need to stay on this gravy train. And also because this identity grievance complex industry is such a lucrative industry because as society tears itself apart, as we find new things to cancel, as people are canceled for racist views, all those people who are pushing this are so filthy rich. You look at Black Lives Matter co-founder Patricia Colos, Brown's black people have been shot by white cops, riots everywhere, and she's staying in luxurious multi-million dollar mansions. That's Marxism in general. So
It's totally the opposite. They pretend to be oppressed while they are basically profiting off causing civil violence. That's essentially what they're doing.
basically, yeah,
Um,
and that's what they want in Britain because in Britain they have said that America's beer code is the same here in Britain, and they're also trying to do that in Australia. And so, yeah, it's Marxism rebadged. Margaret Thatcher once said that socialists had to find new ways to rebadge their thing. And, well, this is it.
well, talking about that, this is actually began in earnest with the postmodernist movement, which was put together by the French intellectuals trying to rebrand Marxism into something that didn't have all the baggage of mass murder of the last century. And so we ended up with postmodernism in schools, and that went from being essentially an artistic movement where the writer's intent doesn't matter and there's no such thing as truth and all that sort of rubbish, which I hated. And that then became this almost overnight, it somehow morphed into let's incite a race war, which it should be condemned by every politician in the world, and yet somehow people think they're virtuous if they engage in this behavior. But one thing about that, you are an ethnic minority, technically, as far as the left are concerned, particularly from New Zealand, which means you really are a minority. Let's face it.
Yeah.
But were you ever approached in the school system or by these woke lefties to try and recruit you to their causes? Did you experience any of that, or did you just somehow escape?
I never experienced that in high school, and I never experienced that at TAFE. But I think because now that I know them really well, I'll know how to dodge it. But I, but no, I never experienced it. I mean, if anything, all the homophobia and all the racism actually comes from 99.9% actually comes from the online to the left. All of it. So
That
none of it,
is
none of it is in real world. I never experienced it in the real world. It's always on Twitter online. It's like a whole new world.
It is a whole new world, and we will talk about them in a minute. But just before we do, a little promo for Boo. I went to your writing blog, and I was struck by this paragraph you put out to describe why you choose to write in politics. And I think as the Conservatives welcome the next generation of writers up and political commentators up, it's important to understand what's motivating these people to write basically against the trend of their generation, and they suffer a lot of criticism and a lot of intimidation from their peers. So this is what Fui says on his blog. Another reason of why I've created this blog is largely thanks to the left-wing domination of social media and of mainstream media. And for years, they successfully infiltrated and have taken over our media class, and instead of impartial journalism, it's been left-wing bias. Journalists have now been reduced to parroting media statements, promoting conspiracy theories, pumping out endless left-wing bias, and being hostile towards conservative guests. Now, I encourage people to check out Foo on Twitter. He's at Fooey from Perth. That's F-O-O-E-Y from Perth, one word, and his blog, fooeyconservativeblog.wordpress.com, and we will make sure we put those links in the description. But you've talked about social media, so let's dive in and have a chat about this world of chaos and craziness that you and I both actually met in. Like, that's where I met you, was on Twitter.
Yeah.
And people won't know this, but we started a little conservative radio thing for a little while when we were getting started in commentary.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that King Penguin Radio? That was fun.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Let's talk about one of these goddesses from the left, so to speak, Magda. What has she been up to lately, Foo?
Oh, you mean Sharon? Oh God, she is wacko on Twitter. It was a photocop image of Scott Morrison, Jenny Morrison, the Governor General, and his wife at Government House signing the condolences book for Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Now, Emma Witches, which is Mother Effing Witches, which I don't even know how to describe them. They photocopied an image of Jenny Morrison looking at her husband, standing from afar as he signed a condolences book, and Magda, in a drunken state, tweeted, "I genuinely thought this was a Photoshop image of Handmaid's Tale, but no, this is 21st century law." And then in the other tweet, in another drunken state, she tweeted on an image of a zoomed-in image of Jenny Morrison doing the okay sign on her daughter's arm, which was unintentional, and she thought, "What's that little hand signal thingy?" And it just blew up. And then in the worst damage control interview I've ever seen, she wanted a current affair, and she attacked those who were coming after her as far right. She attacked the Christian soldiers, religious right, political faction in Australia. She made a conspiracy theory that they were all a distraction from Christine Holgate's testimony, despite they all blew up the day before her testimony. And then it just reviewed her father's views. I mean, I wrote an entire article of it. It was just, oh God, it was just a disaster for Magda. And she has a show coming up on Channel 9, The Weakest Link. She's exposed herself as the Weakest Link instead. And
that's a half hate from us too. Like so many feminists, right, on the Me Too woke left, Magda specifically goes after conservative women, using her enormous platform of social media to intimidate and harass her political peers. But now, don't get me wrong, okay? I am a free speech absolutist, and I have no problem with this kind of discussion. I think she's fine to make poor taste memes if she wants to. People will judge her, and they did judge her poorly for it. But my point is, she then demands protection when people criticize her options. Now, you can't have it both ways. Either you're
exactly. And I've got a good example. Over the weekend, SWA went into lockdown, and as Anzac Day veterans were fenced off on the Shrine of Remembrance, poor Jane Carroll got attacked in the Australian, and I went through the Twitter timeline. It's all these people, all these drips, all these civil rights, all these broken people feeling so sorry for Jane Carroll, and I just told her to basically suck it up. And one of the people and one of the people said, oh no, sorry, it was a tweet that she retweeted, um, of basically saying, oh no, was it a tweet that I haven't had breakfast this morning, so.
Well, look, basically, what you're getting at is that the left, they don't play by the same rules as we do, especially online. I mean,
Oh
and
no,
you are
they
the
did not
oppressor.
lie. They did not lie that Carol and Sebastian were attacked. Now tweeted that these same degenerates will attack Jenny Morrison mercilessly, but they can't attack Matt and Sebastian. They
No,
can't
of course
attack
not.
Jane Carroll. So there was this double standard. And these are the same people who attended the March of Justice calling for, women's rights and all that. And then they turn around, they go, Jenny Morrison is a fat slab, but you can't attack Matt and Sebastian or Jane Carroll. It's like, do you see how ridiculous you sound?
If you're
So
going to
yeah.
judge Jenny Morrison for her life choices and how she chooses to behave, then I'm sorry, but Magda is fair game for all of us to judge her life
But then
choices.
you'll be called a fat. But then you'll be called a fatphobic, sexist,
Yeah,
and
well,
misogynist.
what I find amazing is that you are often talked about as an oppressor. You, Marcus Fu, are an oppressor by people who have enormous taxpayer-funded jobs and the privilege of being on the left. Now, just on that, Magda's pinned tweet at the top of her profile says, "Troll me as much as you like. I am never gonna close my Twitter account." Now, this demonstrates the absolute privilege of being a spokesperson on the left, because Twitter protects her vile rhetoric, and no matter what she says, Twitter is never going to take down her account. But anyone who dares to challenge Magda can be removed and censored by social media in Silicon Valley. And
I
so
mean,
the
it's just
same
like when
people
Jane Carroll
who
called
trust
half.
about white privilege are the ones who enjoy a state of privilege. Is
I
that
mean, it's just like when Jane Carroll, 2 years ago, when Scott Morrison won the election, she was at a wedding, and in a drunken fit of rage, she called half the country drunken and turd, and she's still on Twitter. And it's funny. Jane Carroll has never blocked me, nor has Matt Stefanski, nor have they ever attacked me before. So it's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, they've both blocked me. I can't see what they post anymore. But you mentioned Jane Carroll a number of times. Now she seems to be outraged again this week, and it's worth actually reading her outraged tweet. It
Oh.
says, "This war talk, this is the war with China, is totally irresponsible and dangerous. Drought, fire, pandemic, pestilence, floods, and now war. It's positively biblical, which is why it's terrifying. Given the religiosity of this government." Now, just before we get into the ridiculous she's actually posted, this was meant to be her way of tapping onto the anti-religious tweets that were going on for Scott Morrison, the hashtags that are attacking his faith. That's why she wrote this piece of rubbish that she has here. But I don't think she realized what she was doing, because she's been one of the loudest voices regarding, oh, I don't know, drought, fire, all kinds of. I mean, let's be clear. Apocalypse is the language of the left. So, what do you think of Caro's ridiculous double standard?
Oh, it's hilarious because I love it whenever Jane Carroll talks about climate change or floods or drought, because I remember in one tweet, and my first article for this blog was about Jane Carroll and her climate hypocrisy. Remember when she drove her car into the that
Oh, it's
remember?
just this photograph of her four-wheel drive like this. And like, how did you screw that up? It wasn't even raining.
So, and I remember I wrote an article about that, and I found a tweet where she when one the where a Twitter innocent Twitter said something along the line that climate change doesn't cause drought or something like that, and she went off, and I remember her tweet, and she said, for fuck's sake, I'm a part-time, as of a calibrate, a part-time owner of a wine company. Don't you tell me about climate change. And she just went off. Like, she just exploded on this poor innocent Twitter. And it's funny she talks about floods and droughts, considering that she pushes for a really hard left-wing policies and climate change. She has said before she's with the Green, and so it's no surprise that she pushes for. I mean, she even said on the drum on the ABC when they were discussing about the cost of climate change and global warming, and she's one of those people that said who doesn't really care about the cost because she's wealthy, she's privileged, she will survive whatever economic apocalypse comes when we have a full-on climate change agenda. She said on the drum about the cost of global warming. And I'll be ecstatic if I remember this. She said, "It's a bit like saying a child has cancer or terminal illness, and we can't afford the drugs or something like that. We can't afford the medication. So what's the hassle? We better just let the kid die." she said, she said that on the drum, and no other parent was like, "Oh, you're crazy, woman." But that's her modus operandi. She pushes for climate change. She pushes for this Armageddon narrative because
Well, what
she
you're
has the
actually
best.
saying is
She has the best.
she's outraged by herself, but she's outraged by her own rhetoric because that's what she
Yeah.
said. But I'm not sure
Oh.
about the pestilence. I mean, she's written pestilence, but I can see that occur. I mean, unless she means the mouth plague out west, but that happens literally every couple of years. So it's not really like a hellfire, the war is ending kind of deal.
I love how she put pestilence, and I love how she made it. She put biblical or whatever biblical.
Biblical references. I mean, she stopped short of saying the frog plague and your firstborn's going to die. I mean, she almost went there, but she didn't quite make it.
She should have added the 12 plagues of Egypt. That was the 12 biblical plagues. I mean, it's funny. She in her attempt to try and smear Scott Morrison's faith and the Bible and the 12 plagues of Egypt, she managed to make a complete fool of herself. And it just reminds me of all those insane climate Armageddon rhetoric that she has said in the past. And instead of, sending her to an aged care home, they prop her up on breakfast television, they prop her up on ABC Q&A, she's on the drum, she's everywhere, she's a frightfully annoying, frightfully loud feminist. I think she's got a bigger platform than Magda Zabansky or even Clementine Ford. I don't know why she has such a big...
She's a feminist who hates women. I mean, her and Dee were just having saying about me, why should I be allowed to speak? Because clearly, they're allowed to speak, but nobody else is. But, she does, I'm going to grant Cara this. She makes a great point in her discussing of all this continuous apocalyptic dialogue that it's terrifying and that we shouldn't be doing it. Well, that's a great lesson for the left. Maybe they should stop telling 4-year-olds they're going to die tomorrow because of some, unless their parents pay more tax, which is essentially the message of the climate change cult. Now,
well, I think it'd be great if she I think it'd be great if she follows it, but then just like the anti-racist left, she would have nothing to latch on. She would just be nobody.
It's her only form of discussion. If she can't talk about the apocalypse, then she becomes completely irrelevant because she doesn't produce anything of her own. But as we
Who should be good for society? Who should be good for society? We'll finally move forward.
Instead of regressing into the last couple hundred years. As we draw to a close here on Curtain Call Fu, we love to ask a fun question of all of our guests, and that is, if you could have dinner with anybody, living or dead, who would it be and why?
I was thinking about this all night and I had two people in mind, but I finally come to one person, and that would be His Majesty King Maha Vajiralongkorn of Thailand. Why? Because I love the Thai royal family more than the British royal family, and I think it would be a elegant experience to dine with the King of Thailand. I think it would I'll die and be happy if that was it. But it would just, having the chance to walk through the Dusit Palace or walk through the palace grounds and to sit in the presence of the King of Thailand, who's still a very highly respected figure in Thailand. I don't think anybody could come close. I had other people in
I
mind,
didn't
but
say which temple would you like to have dinner at. I didn't say which temple would you like to have dinner at. I said which person, Fu. Not an excuse to visit temples.
the King of Thailand. No, I said Dusit Palace. That's the royal ground. I said Dusit Palace. I didn't say a temple. I just
Is
think
it what would you ask any particular questions? Like, is there anything you would like to know from someone in that position? What they might have seen or how they think of civilization, or is there anything particular that interests you?
definitely definitely about the Chakra dynasty, which is the current dynasty of Thailand, and definitely the Chakra dynasty, definitely Thailand as a country, and how he feels they should move forward as a nation, so something like that, and probably the future of the royal family. So yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today, Fu. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on our show, and I hope everyone can go and look up your writing because you're a brilliant young talent, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you for joining us on Curtain Call. We are hosted by The Good Source, the home of conservative and libertarian voices. Help us fight fake news by following us online. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and all good podcasting services. If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe.